Hello, it's future editing Corinda here. Before we dive into the episode, wanted to formally introduce the very special guest we were so blessed to have on this episode, Rachel Arthur. Now, if you are a naturopathy student or new grad in Australia, I'm going to put money on the fact that you know who Rachel Arthur is and she needs no introduction, but for those of you who maybe haven't heard of her, Rachel has over 30 years of experience in the clinic and the classroom as one of the top practitioners and educators in integrative nutrition and health. She has attracted a large following of clinicians who value her outstanding, independent, unbiased education and leadership. And I'm one of those clinicians following her. With a particular interest and highly developed skill set in diagnostics, Rachel is particularly known for developing this in others from scratch or by rapidly growing their existing knowledge base, and I can also attest to that. In this way, she endeavours to truly build the bridge we can all walk across that connects mainstream medicine and naturopathy, nutrition, and integrative health. And today specifically, we dive into one of Rachel's, I would say, other big passion areas, which is just setting the record straight on mismanaged, misunderstood micronutrients. Julie and I recently saw Rachel speak at a Vic Herbs seminar. I can't even remember the title of it, but it was just going through the nuance of micronutrients, the B vitamins, vitamin C, the fat-soluble vitamins, and minerals for that matter, and just how we are prescribing them or using them in a way, or how they're generally viewed, is so incongruent with how they actually behave in the human body. And there is a lot that we know that the market and that I would say the general populations of clinicians haven't quite caught up with. But then there's also so much that we don't know. But we're prescribing and teaching and educating in ways as though we do know certain things for sure, and we don't. And so this conversation with Rachel gave us such a, she's already been planting seeds for us over the years. I personally get so much just from her free blog posts. So the seed was being planted, but this conversation in particular really helped, I think, deepen our devotion towards and just respect for the intricacy and specificity of nutritional biochemistry, how nutrients from food, from supplements, behave in our bodies. There is so much nuance, and I think Rachel has continued with our running record that every guest we've interviewed on the Nuanced Naturopaths has said nuance on their own. During the conversation, we don't plant the seed because a lot of these topics are just naturally nuanced. Another thing I really loved about this conversation is how Rachel sort of grounded us back into nature and reminding us, as naturopaths in particular, that we often got into naturopathy from some kind of respect for, adoration of, or reverence of nature. And for some of us, our prescribing habits can become very not natural. So it was a really eye-opening conversation, so many insights here. And I believe if you're just a health-conscious person, maybe you're not a naturopath or a nutritionist, you will get so much out of this. And I cannot wait for you to be blessed, as we were blessed, by the teachings and words of Rachel Arthur. Enjoy. And be sure to check out the links in the description, whether you're watching or listening to this, for the links to some of Rachel's amazing clinical resources. Hello, and welcome back to another very special episode of the Nuanced Naturopaths. I'm Julie. I was going to say I'm Julie. I'm Corinda.
I'm Julie.
And we have a very special guest with us today who I think low-key Julie and I are both fangirling quite intensely.
When you say low-key, I think we made that pretty obvious at the NHAA summit.
Yeah.
I think there was some overt fangirling there.
Yeah. And actually, if I may, Rachel, I am so pleased that we've spoken again because my first words to you, meeting you at the NHIA summit, was thanks, Rachel Arthur, because we just got off stage and you're like, great job, guys. And I was like, and I really thought they were going to be the last words you'd ever hear from me. So I'm really glad we didn't scare you off.
No, not at all. Loved your enthusiasm.
Awesome, awesome. And we're keen to get enthusiastic today about all things nutrition, I think, in a nutshell, and just like the amount of misconception and confusing, conflicting information that's out there, you know, for us as health professionals, let alone for the general public who are trying to navigate their own health issues and their own recommendations, what they're being told at the pharmacy, in the doctor's office, by their naturopaths.
I think the dogma is the thing that I find most interesting.
Yeah.
The naturopathic dogma, but it's not limited to naturopaths. Those really strongly held beliefs that maybe don't have the substance. I'm wondering, what's the first time you ever encountered that, and how did that impact you? Was that during your studies or after?
Yeah, well, I think you don't know dogma when you see it, right? And when you hear it. And
True.
so I would say dogma was throughout my training. And I think that I want to make it clear that I absolutely loved my undergraduate in naturopathy. I, even to this day, think it was brilliant. But it was incorrect in lots of ways. And part of the way that it was incorrect was as a result of dogma that was being passed down, that was just being recirculated and, you know, from one generation of lecturers to the next. So, but I was so in awe of what I was learning and who was teaching me, and I think rightfully so. I have great respect for the lecturers that I had, that I didn't know it was dogma. I didn't know that we were kind of, I guess one of the things, and this is why it's probably important to say you don't know dogma when you hear it, because you don't.
Yeah.
I didn't know the history of, let's say, naturopathy. Okay, of course, there was a unit that we were supposed to do. Wasn't the best attendee for that unit, I've got to say. But for me, more meaningfully, recently I unpacked the history of nutrition as a science. And that's when I went, oh my goodness, here's all the roads that nutrition took, and then naturopathy took, and naturopathic nutrition took, that have brought us to here. And now I can understand today by unpacking yesterday, basically.
Yeah.
And now I see the dogma very, very clearly. Now, it's not to say I've just woken up in 2026 and I go, now I realize there's dogma. Because, of course, I think if people know anything about my career and kind of the things I've pursued with a passion, it's been to question everything. But I want to say to everybody listening to this who has more recently graduated, including you two, like, love what you do, be in awe of what you're learning. It is wonderful stuff, but it's not all true.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm wondering, can we just throw some examples of these little like dogma bites, I guess we can call them, of like things that we do here in our lectures or just in circles, just for people to be able to recognize and go, oh yeah, shivers, I've heard that.
Yes. Okay. So you asked me in preparation for this discussion today, you know, do I remember the first time when I went, oh, that's, where did that come from? Is that really true? Why am I practicing this way, or why am I prescribing this way? And to be honest, I'm too old. I can't remember. But I can give you a more recent example.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about B vitamins. Very uncool, very unsexy, right? B vitamins, because they're kind of entry level, you know, nutritional prescribing. We just think, give someone a B complex, I don't know, 50 mgs of the major ones each, off they go. It's the least thinking we need to do as a nutritional prescriber. And we're so relieved that it's the least thinking we need to do. Bonk, bonk. Right? That's dogma right there.
Yeah.
So first of all, the first element of dogma there is that you prescribe the B vitamins together, like there's some brotherhood. Do we understand that the B vitamins are collected as a group because they were discovered in a sequence? They have almost no other chemical relationship. So I have said these guys are the junk drawer in your kitchen. They are miscellaneous. We have just thrown in the first one we found and then the second one we found, and they're not remotely similar. They're not even siblings. And yet we go, oh, here, if you need B1, have some B2, B3, B5, B6, B7, B9, B12. B12 has a metal in the middle. It bears no resemblance to any other B vitamin. And then there's the dose. Oh my goodness. Show me a paper that says that 50 milligrams of B3 and B6 and whatever is safe, effective, makes sense. You won't find it. We researching, basically undoing the dogma of nutritional prescribing, Julie, researching everything about each of the essential micronutrients. Historically, we went right back to their earliest papers of, what a deficiency actually looks like, and to the most up-to-date understandings of, how we take them up, carry them around the body, all of those sorts of things. There is no evidence that those doses make any sense with B vitamins. In fact, Blackmore's funded 2 studies way back, where they looked at different doses of B vitamins. It was a small study, small sample of patients, but they looked at doses that were kind of like the Chemist Multi brand, 1 milligram, around the EI. Then they looked at another product that had around about, let's say, I'm just using B3 as a proxy marker of the kind of respective doses of all the other Bs in these products. So the B3 was, just a few milligrams in the chemist sort of low dose one. And then the next step up was sort of maybe 10 to 15 milligrams of B3. And then the next step up was 50 milligrams of B3. But of course, it wasn't just B3. These were all B complexes. Which dose worked? The 10 to 15 milligram one, the one in the middle. No, the 50. And even still, that's not great science. That study, which suggested that the sweet spot was around about this 10 to 15 milligram mark or whatever, it needs replicating in larger samples. And, it was a study, and, so the way, I think that that's probably going to be very impactful for people to hear just that. Oh, they're complex. Great. This is easy street. This is something I don't need to give a lot of thought. By George, you need to give it a lot of thought. That is not the way to prescribe B vitamins.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I actually want to call myself out. And again, just as like a reference point and a resonance point for other naturopaths and nutritionists and students listening, because I'm really trying to think about, okay, so how do we fall into these dogmatic practices? And I think for me, it's this sense of, especially when you're a new grad and a new pracky, this sense of insecurity, really, this sense of, am I doing enough for this patient? And then, you might have out Henry Osiecki's, for the Nutrient Bible, and you're looking at all the functions of the different bees and you're like, yeah, they need that. Yep, they need that indication. Yep. Oh, okay, I can just get a B and then I know they're getting all that. And it's in a multi, and it's like it does this thing to your brain where it's just like there's a kind of soothing, like at least they've got that covered, without even considering how these very different molecules are interacting when they are in sitting in that capsule or that tablet together, let alone how they require different things to be broken down, digested, absorbed. Where are they absorbed? Are they all absorbed in the same area of the GIT? Probably not. Are they relying on different enzymes, different protein carriers, whatever it is to get to the tissues where we're expecting them to have an action? Like, they're not the same in that way. But it's weird how it's like oddly emotional and can kind of come down to insecurity. We think we're not doing enough for our patients, so we give them like a coverall and we're like, oh, yep, they'll be good to go on that.
Because sometimes we've got patients that are expecting, when they take something, they're going to get the same kind of immediate reaction. They're going to feel it in their body immediately, like they do with a pharmaceutical. So there's that kind of, I want to give them something that they can get a quick result so that they will come back for the rest of the treatment as well.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on some really key points that are incredibly relevant. One, the insecurity and this kind of we have to prove our worth. We have to go above and beyond so that there's definitely going to be an effect. But if we go back to that study, and again, it's very low level evidence that needs rigorous retesting, there is no evidence that more is better. There is no evidence in nutritional prescribing. I as part of that nutrient prescribers program, I kept saying to all of our attendees who really hated me for a good part of a year because I was so confronting their dogma, our dogma, making them very uncomfortable, needing to unlearn a lot of untruths. But I kept saying, show me the evidence that more is better. Show me, just show me a paper. Crickets. And going back to what you were saying, Corinda, about, this soothing effect, I really, really get that. And, we just want to feel that we are doing the best for the patient. We want to feel that we are doing everything that we can. And I think it's just what came up for me was sort of two thoughts there. One, which is going to seem like a bit of a tangent, but I've shared the stage many times with an integrative psychiatrist who I have enormous respect for. And she talks about keeping her prescription pad outside of the room. And she said, I don't have it on my desk. And the reason I don't have it on my desk is to make sure that I have really attended to everything I could in that room with that individual. And that it is a very conscious choice to get up from my chair and to walk out of that room and write a prescription for that patient. Now, we sit back and we probably feel very superior, incorrectly so, thinking, well, of course you should, you're a psychiatrist, SSRIs are not lollies. But are we keeping the prescription pad outside of the room? No. No. Our reflex is to prescribe.
Yeah.
And the second thing that came up for me, Corinda, is, and I don't know why this just came up, but I certainly know it's a major element here, is the reason I got into naturopathy, and this, we all have different reasons, but I got into naturopathy because I was in awe of nature. I am a nature child at heart. I grew up in the environment, as in, that was my happy place, was being outdoors and digging in dirt and doing all that stuff. So how have we been manipulated, or at least taken a wrong path somewhere, that we feel reassured by something completely not natural? Because supplements are not natural. There is nothing about them that is natural. They're not natural as a concept. You don't consume iron in isolation. There's no food that gives us iron without the rest. And they're not manufactured in a way that is natural. They are synthetic. They are coming, they're completely formulated and whatever. Very few are natural extracts, and they're insanely expensive. We've looked into, a big complex that is truly natural, and the price would be incredibly prohibitive for patients. So that kind of contradiction is what got me really thinking last year. I was like, oh, I've been such a big prescriber and I've been a big dose queen and I've done all these things, but how did I get here? Like this seems a departure from what attracted me to naturopathy in the first place. I thought nature was the answer. So why have I made a departure from that? And I can retrace it, and I'm sure we all can. If we look back and we go, oh, because of some dogma, because of some industry influence, because of my insecurity as a new graduate, because of this concept that pervades all areas of life that more is better, which is not true.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because and this is one of the questions I had for you, because I love this quote. So Hannah Fry, who's a UK scientist, she said that, paraphrasing it, but in an increasingly complex world, to navigate it as a human and keep your nervous system calm and feeling safe, we tend to reduce things down to this sort of binary perspective. It's good or it's bad, or it's black or it's white. And I wonder sometimes whether this is what's a little bit at play here, that people are trying to simplify it because it's so complex to understand. And human physiology is not simple simple at all. And even just the nutrient side is super
Insanely
complex.
complex. And
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
said to a biochemist more is better, they would boot you out of the room. They go, you don't understand anything about biochemistry, my friend. If
yeah.
you said to a physiologist more is better, if you suggested that any pathway to any of these people that truly know these fields of knowledge was going to be influenced by more of one nutrient, you just show yourself to be a nuff straight away. Like, that's not a thing. Biochemistry doesn't work on and off switches. It's about ratios. And the nutrients never work in isolation. And even the nutrients, when we talk about nutrients, we're overwhelmingly talking about the ones we know about, that we've identified. We're not talking about the other elements of food that we have yet to elevate to that
Mm,
position.
mm,
So, you know, biochemists and physiologists are being more holistic than we are, God forbid. But that's the point that we've come to,
mm, mm.
because they will never go, oh, you could flick on that pathway just by giving some, methyl tetrahydrofolate. They'd be like, are you an idiot? No pathway runs on one isolated nutrient. There were
Yeah,
very, very
yeah,
few, you
yeah.
know.
And
So
even then, there's going to be multiple feedback
feedback
loops.
loops. Yeah, and nutrition, every nutrient, as I've said to you guys, we recently were at the Vic Herbs meeting, there's this idea that we keep adopting kind of pharmacological thinking with nutrition, which is a complete error, because pharmacology is easier. You don't have a need for a drug. There is no drug deficiency state, but we have clear nutritional needs, and therefore we have intense regulation responses to keep it just in the right spot. This is far more complex than pharmacology, and yet we approach nutrition as if they're just green pharma. It's not.
I
Yeah.
think our intuitions are onto something, because I reckon at least half a dozen naturopath friends I've spoken to, when we reflect on our studies, and I'm sure Julie and I have had this conversation before, the one subject we all wanted to do over and over again was nutritional biochemistry. And I think because our guts were just like, there is there's more. It is so complex. It's like when you go into that for the first time, half of it goes over your head. You might catch a
Yeah.
couple of good tidbits, and you learn about P5P, and you're like, oh, there's forms of B6, you know. But we all had this kind of attraction to wanting to like revisit that. And I also like what you said about, we come into it with this awe of nature, and nutritional biochemistry is very, very specific and very, very scientific, but it kind of just gets lumped in with all the other things that we learn in a very different way. Um, and I mean, that alone is going to give me a lot for reflection.
Nutritional biochemistry reinforces the awe of nature, right? It doesn't support giving a B complex at 50 mgs each. They're far from it. It goes, well, actually, B1 mostly works with magnesium. It's all incredibly, dare I use the term, nuanced. It is incredibly nuanced
Yeah, yeah.
and it's relational. It's
Mm,
not,
hmm.
you know, it's not the product on the shelf.
Well, and I was
Yeah.
actually just going to say, is it fair to say that a lot of this dogma ends up coming from marketing and advertising, like, and companies where the big bucks are, and people have their favorite brands and their favorite products, and
Sure. I
Mm,
think it kicks it down the road. I don't think it comes from there.
mm,
When I recorded I said last year I became intensely interested in our history. And so I
mm.
recorded a series called the Supplement Boom series. And I went right back and I said, right, let's get clear. How did we get here? Let's start at the beginning. So I started with literally the isolation of the first nutrient and I followed it along through the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And every decade it was like, oh my God. Oh, that's what happened. Oh my God. Oh, now I see how we got here.
Mm.
So, literally, when you look at that timeline, it makes perfect sense that this wasn't originally industry driven. I mean, there's always been associated industry that benefits, of course, if there's supplements to sell. But that's not its origin story, actually. The origin story of nutrition, and I won't take you through the whole timeline, but that series certainly does, and beyond, is, we were in a time during the war when we needed to ration food. And so the RDIs came about and government decided nutrition was a public responsibility, and you follow it along. And we went from concerns about undernutrition to then concerns about overnutrition, but, chronic diet related diseases. It all makes sense as you follow it along how we ended up here. Industry has
Mm.
just been a beneficiary, shall we say. Like they have just
Yeah.
over and over again. And right now they are benefiting big time. And I'm
Yeah.
really, really fired up about this because
Mm.
that is to our detriment. That is to our
Yeah.
patients' detriment. And we need to turn this ship around.
Yeah. Absolutely. I can highly endorse that supplement boom series. Yeah. Fabulous and really eye-opening.
Yeah. One
Yeah.
of the things that you asked about, prior to this conversation was back to Hannah Fry, which I love what she says, about we keep things simple because simple settles our nervous system. And you expanded on that, Julian. You said, patients need to have their nervous system settled as well. If it all feels too complex and they're feeling angst about, have I got all my nutrients? Am I well? Am I optimal? What do we do in the face of that? And how do you respond? And my thoughts on this is with reassurance. Like that is our best tool.
Mm.
Because what I might be inclined to say to someone who, and this is very common, like you guys are seeing it, I know how often this is presenting, that patients, it's like they've overheard things, whether that's online, in other media, in conversations with friends, that make them anxious, that they are deficient, imbalanced, unwell, not going to live forever, dare I say, all of those sorts of things.
Mm.
And that, they have to crack the code to resolve that. But the reassurance is very powerful. If perhaps we present it as saying to them, well, do you know about the composition of air and how we, from that huge composition of air, we extract oxygen, we breathe it in, it travels through our blood, and ultimately it produces energy. Do you know all the bits about that? Do you need to know all the bits about that for it to happen? No. And what I would say to them is, this is just yet another illustration that nature has our backs. We don't need to understand or overthink nature. We are designed to live on this earth, and we are designed to eat the foods that grow on this earth. So you don't have to understand oxygen extraction, transpiration, respiration, Krebs cycle, electron. You don't need to understand that for it to keep you alive and for you to be well. Likewise, nutrition does its thing for us if we can follow some very simple principles, which is eat the foods that are grown on earth as much as possible, wherever possible. It has our backs. That's what we were designed for.
Oh, that's bloody
I love
beautiful. It's so funny. Like, I would always, often, and, for a long time, one of my mantras has been like, the universe has my back. And I think about it in a very like spiritual, energetic way. I can't believe how much reverence I have for nature. And I've never leaned on that mantra
Yeah.
as well, that nature has our backs. And I think we need to, you said reassurance is a big key. And I think for us to be able to reassure our patients, we need to have the confidence in what we know, but also in what we don't know and what is out of our control. And we need to be able to communicate that effectively. And I love that. I love that analogy. That's definitely going in my bank. And something that
Me too.
something that I kind of would go on about a few years ago, but haven't really as of late. I would tell some patients, like, we need to have a little bit of mystery in the medicine. You can't know, and I still don't know, maybe some people, I don't know, maybe it's person dependent, but you can't know exactly how something is gonna work because we actually can't even control that.
We
No,
don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
no.
There are too many variables in each individual. Like, even if one of my big passion projects at the moment is looking at how we unintentionally manipulate our microbiome through supplementation. Like, you give someone a B complex, I know I'm bashing the Bs, but honestly, you give them any supplement and you think I'm giving them this for their biochemistry, for their energy pathways, for their nervous system. Actually, you know what you fed first? Their bugs. And do you know the outcome of that or the upshot of that? No. No, chances are you don't, because this is an emerging field of research that we should have seen coming from a mile away, because we know if you change any element of the environment in which your gut bugs live, hello, 100, 1,000 times the RDI of B1 or whatever it is, you're going to put a different pressure on the bugs and determine who survives and who thrives. So, and that will change individual outcomes. So we don't know actually how everything is going to play out in each individual, because there are infinite variables. And that comes back to having some humility around that, rather than trying to answer every question, which is, I think the three of us are agreeing, is not possible and not necessary and not desirable, really. The other thing that you just touched on there, Corinda, about saying to people there has to be some mystery in the medicine, and the need for reassurance with patients, is another area I got really fascinated in the last year, was what I call the medicine beyond the bottle, which is absolutely nothing that we prescribe and everything that we say and we do with our patients. And one of the key elements of positive clinical outcomes is that your patient, well, there's three elements behind this. One is that the sense that you've conveyed that they matter. A second is encouraging what's called positive expectancies, so they have a positive expectation of outcomes. And the third is that they experience something called active hope. Now, hope isn't optimism and, I'm going to win the lotto and, any of that. It's a very well understood, quite complex psychological phenomenon.
Mm.
It is like a muscle that we need to build in our patients as practitioners. But when we're trying to point out every minutiae of, well, I think, this biochemical pathway is flagging because, you might have a gene there that is the opposite of active hope.
Mm.
That often triggers a response in patients that at the very least things are beyond their control. What's determining their health is not something within them that they can actively necessarily mitigate. It's just a really interesting area. And so that's another one, if we go back to that idea about why we got into naturopathy and we're all saying we're all hippie kids really, and, how have we lost that? I think as part of those hippie kid kind of archetypes, weren't we all mindful about the power of language and the power of belief? And how have we made a departure from that too? In our language, in our excessive pathologizing, in our loss of trust in nature,
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I have to say straight up, if anybody's going, oh my God, she's drunk the Kool-Aid, quite rightly so, because I've been a huge pathologizer. That, pathology is my thing. And I take responsibility for the part that I've played in our profession in that regard of saying, dig deeper, understand the minutiae, all of that sort of stuff. So there's nothing more annoying than an evangelical reformed, naturopath. That's me. Yeah, I think that one of the things that I think the three of us have talked about is there's knowledge and then there's wisdom. And I think what I'm experiencing now, I hope, is that transition from a whole lot of knowledge that has its place into a little bit more wisdom.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think these are elements that come with this. The medicine that's beyond the bottle. What happened to my original motivation? What didn't I believe in nature? Didn't I believe in the power of my words and the power of belief? Where has that gone in contemporary practice?
Well, maybe it's because we can't hold all of the things all of the time. It's about evolving as a practitioner and constantly questioning and learning and re-examining in order to refine what things might be most important for that person in front of me. So,
Absolutely.
because ultimately that's what we do, isn't it? Is filter all of the information down and then apply it to the person in front of us. But it has to be a constant revisiting of every aspect.
It does, and it's and so that requires what I'm hearing from you, Julie, some chameleon qualities, and I relate to that.
Mm.
Like I'm all about food first, and I'm all about de-prescribing supplements, and I'm all about really much more discernment when it comes to when I prescribe and the doses I use. But does that work for every patient? Hell no.
Mm.
Because patients come with their own belief system or their own agenda or their own expectations. And so food first, someone might throw that right back in my face. Ultimately, ideally, I wouldn't recommend a food first approach to the person who that wasn't a good fit for, because I'd already sussed that out during the consult. I'd already gone, ooh, no room for change here.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is someone who
Yeah.
wants a pill.
Mm.
You know, it might prompt me to question whether I'm the right practitioner for them now that I've become a reformed evangelical food first person. But yeah, and you know, we have talked about this, the three of us, what happens when the patient really wants you to prescribe. You know, the patient comes in and goes, I'm trying to conceive, give me everything. And you're like, strongly don't recommend everything. You know, that doesn't fit with the science, actually. It's not an individual approach. I've seen everything. I've learnt a lot about you as an individual. It's not a good fit. I wouldn't give you more folate. I wouldn't give you more iodine.
Mm.
It's a tricky terrain. And so
Mm.
there is that chameleon kind of quality that we need. Use food first when it fits with the patient, educate when they're ready for it. You know, we always, as you said, Julie, are tailoring to that individual in front of us, but we still have to remain the authority in the room. I've had
Yeah.
fights, genuinely fights with patients. They didn't last long as my patient, who wanted me to prescribe iron. And I'm going, the computer says no. Like, I have looked at every angle of your case, and there is no way that iron is helpful, beneficial, whatever. I will never forget, she was a lawyer, and that fight was legendary. And in the end, I just said, I'm not the practitioner for you. She was
Yeah.
determined that IV iron, very topical today because I just published something on how the most commonly used form of IV iron increases fracture rates. It's well established. Just a paper just came out. It's tragic. Awful, awful stuff. And it's being used over and over again in Australia incorrectly. Anyway, this female lawyer who is my patient was like, I need IV iron. That's what's going to fix me. And I'm looking at the iron studies and I'm looking at the FB and I'm going, no, 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 no. But she was so dogged in her belief that that was the fix. What can you do? I'm still the authority in the room, so I'm not going to prescribe it.
Mm.
I just diplomatically said, you'll need to see someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also those, it's a brilliant point that you're the authority in the room, but then when they leave that room, there are other authorities that they're speaking to that
Their authorities. Yeah,
that
it would
have
depend
different.
on. You know, if you're saying, sorry, Julie, I didn't let you finish, but, you know, if they're
No,
going to AI, that's not an authority. If they're going to a doctor, that's not an authority on nutrition. That, you know, so, okay, if they left my room and went to see one of you guys or, you know, someone else, okay, they've got a contrasting opinions, but is that what you meant or it's something else?
Oh no, I was thinking particularly around iron and thinking that my GP's told me I'm low in iron.
Yeah. I know, it's so hard. It's so
I,
hard.
I've had that conversation 3 times this week.
Yeah, Julie. Oh, rough road, isn't it? And look, the shortest end to that argument, which I'm not suggesting we use, would be to just say to the patient, just ask your GP how much nutrition they did as part of their general practice training, because I used to teach in the medical degree just at Monash Uni, and I know back then and to this day it's 3 hours across the whole degree. Unless there's a particular institution that has changed its ways. And Monash was very progressive. They had electives that were around nutrition and sleep and psychology. That's how I got involved. You know, that would be a quick end to that argument about who's the authority in the room, right? But we don't want to be too brutal.
Send our patients off with a hand grenade.
Yeah, we need to know that we're trying to, it's beautiful when we can operate within a shared care environment and we can make a patient feel safe across all of those relationships. So we
Yeah.
try not to polarize and we try not to contradict, but it is very hard when someone who's done 3 hours is saying, no, you definitely need iron. And we've done more often than not 3 years, if not 4 in my case, 5 plus the thesis, where we're going, no, you don't need iron. That is a hard, that's a hard conflict to navigate.
And am I right? Did I read somewhere that the clinical guidelines for iron prescribing for GPs doesn't go far enough back to really incorporate the discovery of hepcidin?
No, it does. I couldn't speak to the most. I'd need to check myself to
Yeah.
guidelines. Look, the incorporation of the understanding around iron regulation is penetrating general practice. Thank God, more often than not, I hear now GPs saying, and these are not integrative GPs, these are, regular GPs just saying, oh, don't take it every day, right? So a bit of knowledge, which is about hepcidin, really,
Yeah.
and came from the Moretti paper, which showed that, 24 hours after taking the first dose, you're not picking up anymore. That bit of information is getting out there. Now, I'm not saying 100% of GPs are across that, but increasingly, you're getting there. But we still have GPs we still have naturopaths, we still have dietitians who don't know how to read iron studies. Like I've got a brilliant example of a patient. He was a man in his 50s who by one GP was told he needed iron, and then a subsequent iron study was performed and he was told that he possibly had iron overload. Neither of those things were correct. Neither of those things. So in the first instance, he was told he needed iron because he was inflamed, and so he'd removed all the iron from his blood. And the GP was not looking at the ferritin, but was looking at the serum iron being low and the transferrin saturation being low and saying, wow, you may need some iron. Now, this is a meat-eating 50-something-year-old male. He went and did another test. He didn't take the iron because I was like, are you joking? And then the next test, which was performed, months later or whatever, came back, and this GP said, oh, I think you've got iron overload. I'm like, I look at the results, and it's because his serum iron and his transferrin saturation are very high. Ferritin was within range for a 50-something-year-old male. And I look at the timestamp and I go, this was collected at, whatever time it was, 11 a.m. How long had you been fasting for at that period? And he said, 16 hours. I said, okay, so you're mobilizing iron from stores because it is a natural response to that period of time of no food intake in terms of iron homeostasis that you will mobilize stores. So let's repeat the test with 8 hours of fasting. Perfectly normal iron studies. So, wow. Forget about hepcidin. Let's just read iron studies correctly as a good foundation. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like I read something of yours, I might be going 6 to 8 weeks back now. There's a similar concept in terms of calcium regulation, right? If fasting ticks beyond a certain point, it will start.
Yes.
I won't say more. I'll let you say more about that.
Okay, so look, this is where I get really excited about nutrition, because when you go back to the science, get offline for God's sake, and the influences and the easy grabs and the stories and the supplements to sell, and you go back to the science, there is nothing short of, thrilling stuff that we're discovering. And this is really, again, as you say, Corinda, it's a parallel with iron in the sense that, of course, calcium is intensely regulated. It's one of the most essential, can I say that? It is an essential mineral, like all the other essential minerals, but I talk about criticality. So what I mean is you won't die from not enough, let's pick something, manganese, right?
Yeah.
But you will die quite quickly if your blood calcium drops too low.
Yeah.
You'll just die. Okay. So that's a criticality to this essential mineral. And I know calcium is very uncool right now. It has been forever in naturopathic nutrition. And I'd love to talk about heroes and villains, which do not belong in nutrition. But anyway, so calcium is a bit of a villain. I think it's an absolute hero. And when you're when you haven't consumed calcium, let's say since dinner the night before, overnight, the natural response is going to be not, oh, my bones. It is literally, oh, calcium is critical in the blood to keep us alive because it's the major second messenger system in blood. So it gets your nerves working, it gets your muscles working, it controls or normalizes blood clotting, blah, 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 on and on. So when we fast overnight, the natural regulatory response to that lack of calcium coming in is the parathyroid glands will fire up and release PTH. That says to the gut, open up the doors, bring in any calcium that you can. It says to the kidneys, hold on to any calcium that you can. Let's see no calcium going out in wee. And it has, a cascade of changes to try and buoy that blood level of calcium during this period, even though it's hours of no intake. So one of the things, Corinda, I've been talking about is the key time to take calcium is first thing in the morning because PTH is a little bugger. When it does that, in addition to it saying to the gut, open up the doors and the kidneys, lock all the doors effectively, it taps your bones. And it's tapping your bones to mobilize the calcium to, fill up the shortfall. And PTH rises are one of the most insidious contributors to poor bone mineral density throughout a lifetime, right? The concept that calcium works like concrete in your bones, like it's just a structural element, is so undervaluing calcium. It is so not the story. Like it is one part of that story. But when you start to get to this finessed level of, oh, it's a circadian rhythm and it's about fasting. And if I fast and then the PTH rises and it taps my bones and the calcium is leached, that's the roller coaster we don't want to be on. Because if you're on that day in, day out, which most women are overwhelmingly, especially women.
I was thinking about that. I don't eat breakfast because I'm not hungry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I've been in the fortunate position where I measure women's PTH who are doing extended fasting overnight, and I can show them. I go, look at this. That PTH surged at 8 a.m. because you didn't take that calcium. And I'm a terrible finger pointing bully with my patients, not really. But it is this clear opportunity then to show them when they took the calcium before they went to the gym, how the PTH didn't peak. And then we see the PTH stayed nice and low. We want it under 4 at all times, ideally. And they didn't tap their bones, right? So this is exquisite stuff. This is what I thought, this is the real power of nutritional prescribing. It's not about you should take 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day because, bones are like concrete and it's a major component of bones. It's about the intricacies of really there's that word again, nuanced prescribing. Really understanding when to give it, how to give it. I've got patients who are osteoporotic, or we've actually brought them back from osteoporosis to osteopenia. And, we've got them doing, that calcium before the gym in the morning, and they literally just need to have a sip of something with it. Like, that I'm not really gonna, compromise their fasting, ideals. And then we might take, 200 milligrams, 250 milligrams before the gym, and then we might take it 2 other times in the day. And we're doing such intense monitoring of these patients that we know that exactly this pattern, with all the other things we're doing, the very specialized weightlifting program for bone mineral density building. But when we put it all together, that is when their NTX, their bone telepeptides, are at their lowest. That is when the PTH is under control. That is thrilling. That's what I think is the goal here.
Magic.
Yeah.
And I think based on that description, it's fair to say, like, compared to how we first started the conversation where I referenced, it feels soothing to, prescribe and you feel like you're covering the bases. I feel like the path that you're describing is one that for students, for naturopaths, I mean, certainly I felt it, the path of nutritional integrity, nutritional specificity, devotion to nutritional biochemistry, it's a much more daunting path. It's harder. There's not a lot of fantastic CPE about it, other than all of your body of work, right? It's not done justice in the degrees, so it can seem like this really daunting, harder path of like, oh, I need to learn this thing really intricately, but the payoff sounds
enormous.
Fantastic.
It's enormous.
Yeah.
It's really enormous. And like, I think going back to your really important point about our anxiety and our certainty, and I mean, the volume of knowledge we've been asked to hold is ridiculous. No one can hold all of that. Don't ask me about herbs. I'll sound really stupid. So but of course I did 4 years of herbal medicine.
Yeah.
So that's just me normalizing for people that I can't speak at this level when it comes to herbs. I'd need to call a friend. So the products and the promotion and the marketing of the products, that's where the soothing comes from, Corinna. And they know how to soothe. They say, oh, kettle, dull, don't you worry your pretty little head about it. This is for bone repair. This is for mental calming. If you saw inside the workings of these companies, and I have seen inside them, I have my spies, you would not be soothed at all. You would know that the way these formulations come about are not scientific. We should not feel soothed by a product that has met a gap in the market at a certain price point, because that's actually how products come about. I don't know if you know that. Yes. So it is a shame that that's the story we're being sold about nutrition, when in fact the real, reassurance would come about if we could go back to what we actually do know, and I mean scientifically, about nutrition, and be discerning with how much we prescribe and all of those sorts of things, and know how to measure efficacy. Because that's one of the big things I say. We could throw the whole kitchen sink at people on a wing and a prayer and a promise and a hope and a dream, and not be able to effectively assess what's working, if anything's working, what's making things worse. We don't know, because we gave them everything in the kitchen sink, effectively. But when I give calcium like that, or when I give iron, or when I give iodine, or when I give B1, I know what to look for in the pathology as well as the clinical picture to go, that's it. Stay right there. Don't give them anything else. We've hit it. That's the sweet spot. Yeah.
I feel like if we have time for one more question to wrap it up,
Mm.
and I'm going to go to one of Julie's fabulous questions. I think this will be a good concluder. If you could delete one belief from the profession's collective head overnight, what would it be and what would you want to grow in its place?
Beautiful question. I loved all of your questions, can I just say? I could chat with you guys any day.
You're on.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's get it daily. People get sick of us, but it'll just be for us.
yeah, fine.
The one belief, if I could remove from our profession, and this gets me a little bit glassy-eyed and teary, is that we are not enough. Because we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that going back to what you said about more is better, whether it's nutrition, whether it's car sizes, whatever it is, unfortunately, really has pervaded our own sense of professional identity. And what that means, and this links into everything we've been talking about, is that we just feel that the foundations aren't enough. That we have to find something more radical. We have to extend out beyond where other people are practicing. We have to do postgraduate or just pick up on some crazy online rabbit hole that tells us, this is the answer to all your patients' issues. Or we can't use B1 thiamine. We have to use an analog of B1, benfotiamine. Says who? Based on what? The science says no. That we can't use vitamin D. We should use calcifidiol, which is actually a pre-hormone. Again, as a nature lover, that I didn't get into naturopathy thinking I was going to be prescribing pre-hormones. I thought I might be recommending sunshine, which has a completely different effect. And you guys know this because you lectured about this, right? Has a completely different effect than any oral form of vitamin D. And so I think that what I would grow in its place is that we need to have, that conversation that we had. I gave you that example of what I might say to a patient about you don't necessarily understand oxygen extraction and how that, and you don't necessarily understand the mechanics of the electron transport chain, but it's all working, right? I think we need to have that conversation with ourselves a little bit, where it's like, the awe that we entered this profession with, that was legit. That's what we need to go back to.
Yeah.
And we need to back ourselves in knowing that nature has our backs. Yeah.
It's brought a tear to my eye.
I'm getting all goose pimples up and down my legs,
I
man.
know, yeah.
This is too much for a Tuesday.
That's a beautiful place to round it off, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's a sentiment that I'm going to stoke the fire of that within myself and in my own practice and tell as many naturopaths as I have conversations with about that. And also remind our patients too, like, nature, man. Nature. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Because that at its core in nutrition really does just support, eat food that grows on earth. I'm not asking people to grind their own rice and whatever. I'm just saying primary foods, if you can just that's all That's all a balanced, God, I've turned into Rosemary Stanton all of a sudden. I don't know if that predates you guys, showing my age.
No.
Oh, it does
I
for
got
me.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll explain it to you later, Corinda.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
But yes, I think the world is in need of that kind of reassurance right now. Nutritional practice is desperately in need of that kind of reassurance right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant.
I
Thank you
think
so
so.
much.
But I cannot thank you enough. And yeah, don't tempt us with a daily. We can do a daily live stream. So I do want to specifically shout out, as you mentioned, the Supplement Boom series, which is a 7-part series. I'm gonna go check that out. And we will have the link for that in the show notes below, wherever you're listening to or watching this. I absolutely trust that anyone who's listened to this conversation has got at least one golden tidbit from it. But I'm sure there's multiple golden threads that they're now asking themselves 1,000 other questions from it. Thank you for what you bring to us, to the industry, the conversations that you keep alive. Also, shout out to the Curious Minds Club for, if there are practitioners listening that want to be a part of these nuanced discussions.
Should have made it a drink. Sorry.
Should have made it a what?
We should have a drinking game. Like drink every time we say nuance, you got to drink your water.
That's it.
So yeah, links to everything will be below. Rachel, I'm speechless. I think I felt a sense of this every time I've spoken to you. Can't thank you enough.
Yeah.
Thank you. And can I just say the same back to you guys? Because I think, as I said to you guys, I know this is such a terrible public confession. I don't listen to podcasts. So I didn't have prior knowledge of what you're doing, but just the conversations that we've had in person and the conversation today, the questions that you wanted to cover, I am all here for it. I think good on you.
Yep. Thank you. I'll be thinking about that before I go to bed tonight, tell you that much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. See ya.